Why was a 7-year-old orphan boy found trembling in a forbidden cave at 3 a.m., speaking in a language he never learned, describing events that haven't happened yet? What did the Jinn whisper to him in those dark hours that made even the eldest imam weep when he heard it? This story will shake you to your core. It will make you question everything you think you know about the unseen world, about innocence as a bridge to the divine, and about the warnings hidden in plain sight. This is not just another tale of the supernatural. This is a testimony that Islam has preserved for centuries, that children, in their purity, sometimes become vessels for truths too heavy for adult hearts. I beg you, stay until the very end, because what this orphan saw in that cave, what the Jinn revealed to him about our world's final days, and what happened to him afterward, it will change how you see everything. Before we begin, check if you're subscribed to this channel and write in the comments which country you're watching from. Your engagement helps us share these profound stories with souls who need to hear them. Now, let me take you to the mountains of Lebanon, to a small village where faith and fear walk hand in hand, to a night when the veil between worlds grew so thin that a child stepped through. His name was Yusuf, just 7 years old, with eyes too old for his small face, and a silence that worried everyone who knew him. The village of Bint Jabil clung to the Lebanese mountains like a prayer carved in stone. Ancient cedar trees stood as sentinels, and the wind that moved through them carried whispers that the elders said were older than Islam itself. Every family had stories, of lights seen dancing in the mountains at night, of voices calling names that belonged to the dead, of caves where no shepherd dared take his flock. Yusuf had lost his parents 6 months earlier in a car accident on the winding mountain road. His mother died instantly. His father lived long enough to recite Shahada and place his hand on Yusuf's head one final time. "Be strong, my lion," he had whispered. "Allah tests those he loves." Now Yusuf lived with his uncle Mahmoud, a stern man who worked in the quarry and had little patience for a grieving child. Mahmoud's wife, Aunt Salma, tried to be kind, but she had 4 children of her own, and Yusuf always felt like a shadow in their house, present but not quite belonging. The boy barely spoke anymore. He attended the village school but sat in the back, silent as stone. He performed his 5 daily prayers mechanically, his small body going through the motions, while his mind wandered to memories of his mother's laugh, his father's strong hands. "That boy is broken," Mahmoud would say to his wife at night, not knowing Yusuf could hear through the thin walls. "His grief has made him strange. He stares at nothing. He talks to himself. Yesterday I saw him standing in the rain, just standing there like he was waiting for something." What Mahmoud didn't know, what no one knew, was that Yusuf wasn't talking to himself. For the past 3 weeks, he had been hearing a voice, a gentle, ancient voice that called to him in his dreams, and sometimes even when he was awake. "Come to the mountain, young one," it would whisper. "Come to the cave of echoes. We have something to show you, something you must see." The cave of echoes. Every child in Bint Jabil knew its name, and every child had been warned to never, ever go near it. It sat high on the mountain, a dark mouth in the limestone cliff that locals said had been there since before Noah's flood. Shepherds claimed their goats would refuse to graze within 100 meters of it. Hunters said their dogs would whimper and pull backward if they came too close. And everyone knew the old stories of men who had entered seeking shelter from storms and emerged days later, aged and white-haired, speaking of visions that drove some mad. "That cave is a threshold," Sheikh Hassan, the village's eldest imam, would tell the children during Friday lessons, "a place where the barrier between our world and the world of the Jinn grows thin. In the time of our great-grandfathers, a holy man sealed it with verses from the Quran. No one should disturb that seal." But Yusuf had been dreaming of the cave for 3 weeks now, dreams so vivid they felt more real than his waking life. In these dreams he would walk up the mountain path, his small feet knowing exactly where to step. He would approach the cave's entrance, and there, sitting at the threshold, would be a figure, not quite human, not quite anything Yusuf could name. The figure had the shape of a man, but seemed made of smoke and starlight. Its eyes were too bright, too knowing, and when it smiled at Yusuf, the boy felt no fear, only a strange, peaceful recognition, as if he were seeing someone he had known before his own birth. "You are pure, young Yusuf," the figure would say in these dreams. "You have not yet learned to lie, to hate, to close your heart. That is why you can hear us. That is why we have chosen you to see." "See what?" Yusuf would ask. "The end and the beginning, the warning that must be delivered." Then Yusuf would wake, his small heart pounding, his pillow soaked with tears he didn't remember crying. On the morning of March 15th, something changed. Yusuf woke before Fajr, and the voice was no longer just in his dreams. It filled the room like the scent of rain. "Tonight," it whispered. "Tonight you must come. The time has arrived, and you must see what we have to show you. Don't be afraid, child. We will protect you. But you must come." All day at school, Yusuf couldn't concentrate. His teacher asked him a question about mathematics, and he simply stared at her, his mind already walking up that mountain path. At lunch, his cousin Ahmad punched his shoulder playfully, and Yusuf didn't even notice. That night, after Isha prayer, after Uncle Mahmoud's snoring began to shake the walls, after even Aunt Salma's worried pacing had ceased, Yusuf rose from his thin mattress. He dressed silently in the dark. He took nothing but his small prayer cap and the tasbih his mother had given him, and he walked out into the night toward the mountain, toward the cave of echoes, toward a destiny that would mark him forever. The mountain path was treacherous in the darkness, but Yusuf's feet moved with supernatural certainty. The moon hung low and full, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Around him the night was alive with sounds, the rustle of unseen wings, the whisper of wind through ancient cedars, the distant howl of something that might have been a wolf, but didn't quite sound like one. Yusuf should have been terrified. A 7-year-old child alone on a mountain at night, climbing toward a place that even grown men feared. But fear had become a distant thing for him, left behind with so many other emotions in the wreckage of his parents' car. As he climbed higher, the air changed. It grew thicker, heavier, as if he were walking underwater. The sounds of the night faded, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the mountain itself. And then he saw it. The Cave of Echoes. Its entrance was larger than he remembered from the times he'd glimpsed it from the village below. The darkness within was absolute, not the simple absence of light, but a darkness that seemed to have substance, weight, presence. And there, carved into the stone around the entrance, were verses from Surah al-Jinn, the protective seal Sheikh Hassan had spoken of. But the seal was broken. The carved letters were cracked, faded, as if centuries had passed in mere weeks. And standing at the threshold, waiting, was the figure from his dreams. In the moonlight, Yusuf could see it more clearly now. It was tall, impossibly tall, with features that shifted like smoke. Its eyes were the color of ancient amber, and they held such sadness that Yusuf felt tears spring to his own eyes without knowing why. "You came," the figure said, and its voice was like wind through caverns, like water over stones, like the echo of a prayer spoken 1,000 years ago. "We knew you would. The pure always hear when we call." "Who are you?" Yusuf whispered, his small voice barely audible. "I am Khalil," the figure replied. "I am Jinn, child. Born of smokeless fire before your kind walked the earth. I served under Sulaiman, peace be upon him, when he commanded us. I heard the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, when he recited the Quran to my people in the valley of Nakhla. I am old, Yusuf, older than your comprehension, and I am bound by oath to deliver warnings when the signs become clear." The Jinn knelt, bringing its shifting face level with Yusuf's. "Do you know why children can see us more easily than adults?" Yusuf shook his head, clutching his mother's tasbih. "Because you haven't yet learned to disbelieve. Your hearts are still clear mirrors, reflecting truth without the distortion of pride, doubt, and worldly desires. That's why prophets always emphasized protecting children's innocence. You are windows to the unseen, little one." Khalil gestured toward the cave's dark mouth. "Inside, the veil is thinnest. Inside, we can show you what most humans never see until the day of judgment. But I must warn you, what you will witness will mark your soul forever. You will carry this knowledge like a weight, and it will change how you see everything. Are you willing?" Yusuf thought of his parents, of his mother's last smile, of his father's final words. "Allah tests those he loves. Will it help people?" he asked quietly. "What you want to show me? That depends on whether they listen to a 7-year-old orphan," Khalil replied with deep sadness in his ancient eyes. "But yes, if they listen, it could save countless souls." Yusuf took a breath, whispered, "Bismillah," and stepped forward. The darkness of the Cave of Echoes swallowed him whole. Inside the cave, there was no light, but somehow Yusuf could see. The cavern stretched impossibly large, far larger than the mountain itself should have contained. The walls weren't stone, but something else, something that rippled and moved like water frozen in time. And everywhere, there were figures, Jinn, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps. Some appeared human-like, tall and dignified, dressed in clothes from eras Yusuf couldn't name. Others were shapes that hurt to look at, geometries that shouldn't exist, forms that shifted between animal and element, and something else entirely. Some glowed with gentle light. Others seemed to absorb darkness into themselves, but they all turned to look at Yusuf when he entered, and in their ancient eyes he saw the same thing, sorrow. "Welcome, son of Adam," they said in unison, their voices creating harmonies that made the very air vibrate. "Welcome to the place between moments, where past and future collapse into now. Welcome to the place of witnessing." Khalil placed a hand on Yusuf's shoulder. The touch was cool, but not unpleasant, like mist on a summer morning. "What we are about to show you are not fantasies or dreams, child. These are visions of what is coming. Some are ordained and cannot be changed. Others are warnings, possibilities that can still be avoided if humanity heeds the signs. Do you understand?" "I think so," Yusuf whispered, though his small heart was pounding. "Then watch." The cave walls began to shimmer and shift, and then Yusuf saw. He saw cities, massive gleaming cities of glass and steel, larger than anything in Lebanon, larger than anything he'd imagined. He saw humans walking through these cities, but they weren't talking to each other. Each person stared at glowing screens in their hands, their faces illuminated by cold blue light, their eyes empty of warmth. "Disconnection," Khalil whispered. "The first sign. Humans together but alone. Families under one roof, but worlds apart." The prophecy said, "In the end times people will be close in body but far in heart." The vision shifted. Now Yusuf saw mosques, beautiful, ornate mosques with golden domes and marble floors, but they were empty. Their prayer halls echoed with silence. Outside, life rushed past, but no one entered. "The houses of Allah abandoned," another Jinn spoke, its voice like distant thunder. "Prayer becomes habit without heart. Fasting becomes tradition without transformation. The rituals remain, but the souls within them die." The vision shifted again, and this time Yusuf gasped. He saw the earth itself changing. He saw ice melting in places that should be frozen. He saw water rising to swallow coastal cities. He saw forests burning with fires so vast they looked like the flames of Jahannam itself. He saw animals fleeing, desperate, finding nowhere to go. "The earth rebels," Khalil said softly. "Your kind was made Khalifa, stewards of this world. But instead of protecting, humans consume. Instead of preserving, they destroy. The earth itself cries out, and its cries are a sign." But it was the next vision that made Yusuf fall to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He saw war. Not the wars of history books, but war beyond imagination. He saw weapons that could turn day into night, that could end entire cities in moments. He saw children, so many children, running through rubble, calling for parents who would never answer. He saw mothers clutching babies that no longer breathed. He saw fathers digging graves for entire families. "Jerusalem," Khalil whispered, and Yusuf somehow knew the word, though he'd never heard it spoken quite that way. "The final battle will center there. The Dajjal will come one-eyed and deceiving, performing wonders that make the faithless bow. But the faithful will recognize him, because truth is written between his eyes for those who can truly see." The visions came faster now, overwhelming in their intensity. Yusuf saw the sun rising from the west. He saw the earth trembling with earthquakes that swallowed nations. He saw mountains moving like clouds. He saw the sky splitting open and angels descending with scrolls of judgment. And then he saw him, Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus, peace be upon him, descending with his hands on the shoulders of two angels, his face radiant with divine light, returning as the Muslims had always known he would. "The end is not evil," Khalil said gently, steadying Yusuf as the child sobbed. "The end is mercy, but before mercy comes the test, and the test is already beginning. You, child, must tell them. You must be the witness." When Yusuf emerged from the cave, dawn was breaking over the mountains, but something was wrong. He couldn't remember walking out, couldn't remember the path down. One moment he was in the cave, surrounded by Jinn and visions that tore his small heart apart. The next moment he was standing at the cave's entrance, the first rays of sun touching his face, his cheeks wet with tears. He didn't remember crying, but he wasn't alone. A search party was climbing the mountain path, Uncle Mahmoud leading, his face red with anger and fear. followed by Sheikh Hassan Ahmad and half a dozen village men carrying flashlights and calling Yusuf's name. "Yusuf!" Aunt Salma's scream echoed across the mountain when she spotted him. "Ya Allah, he's alive!" They rushed to him and Mahmoud grabbed the boy's shoulders so hard it hurt. "Where have you been? We've been searching all night. Do you know what you put us through? We thought you'd fallen or been taken by animals or—" But then Mahmoud stopped, because he was looking into his nephew's eyes, and what he saw there made him release the boy and step back. "Uncle," Yusuf whispered, his voice strange, older somehow. "Uncle, they showed me. The Jinn showed me everything. The end is coming. We have to warn people. We have to—" "The Jinn?" Sheikh Hassan stepped forward, his weathered face grave. "Child, what are you saying?" "In the cave," Yusuf turned to point at the Cave of Echoes. "They were waiting for me, Khalil and all the others. They showed me visions. They showed me the end times. I saw cities drowning. I saw the earth burning. I saw children dying in wars. I saw—" "He's delirious," Mahmoud interrupted, fear making his voice harsh. "The cold, the night, the grief, it's driven him mad. We need to get him to a doctor." But Sheikh Hassan held up his hand. He approached Yusuf slowly, kneeling to look the boy in the eyes. "Yusuf, listen to me carefully. Did you enter the Cave of Echoes?" "Yes." "And you spoke with beings you believe were Jinn?" "Not believe, Sheikh. They were Jinn. Khalil served under Prophet Sulaiman. He heard Prophet Muhammad recite Quran at Nakhla Valley. He's been alive for—" "What did these visions show you?" Sheikh Hassan interrupted gently. "Tell me exactly." And Yusuf told him, not in the simple language of a 7-year-old, but in words that flowed from somewhere beyond himself. He described technological marvels he'd never seen. He quoted hadiths about the end times that he'd never learned. He spoke of battles and betrayals, of signs in the heavens and signs in human hearts, of the Dajjal's deception and Isa's return. He spoke for 30 minutes straight, never pausing, never hesitating, his young voice carrying words that made the grown men around him exchange frightened glances. When he finally stopped, exhausted, there was absolute silence on that mountain path. It was Ahmad who broke it, his teenage voice cracking. "Baba, how does he know all this? Yusuf barely speaks in school. He's never studied Islamic eschatology. How does he know the signs of the end times better than the Sheikh?" Mahmoud's face had gone pale. "This is Jinn deception. They're known for it. They trick humans, especially vulnerable children. We need to perform ruqya on him, to drive out whatever has—" "No," Sheikh Hassan said quietly, but with such authority that everyone fell silent. "This is not possession. Look at his eyes. Is there chaos there, madness? Or is there only exhaustion and sorrow?" The Sheikh stood, his old knees protesting, and looked toward the Cave of Echoes. "I have been imam of this village for 43 years. My father was imam before me, and his father before him. And each generation we have told stories of that cave, of holy men who received visions there, of warnings delivered through the pure of heart." He turned back to Yusuf. "The Jinn are not all evil, though many are. Some are believers, as the Quran tells us, and some carry messages that Allah permits them to deliver." "You believe him?" Mahmoud asked incredulously. "I believe something profound happened to this child last night," Sheikh Hassan replied, "and I believe we must investigate carefully before we dismiss or accept his testimony." He placed his hand on Yusuf's head, noting how the boy swayed with exhaustion. "Come, child, let's get you home, fed, rested, and then when you're ready, you will tell your story again. And this time I will listen with all my knowledge of our faith, and we will discern together whether this is truth, test, or trial." As they descended the mountain, Yusuf looked back once at the Cave of Echoes. Standing at its entrance, visible only to him, was Khalil. The ancient Jinn raised one hand in farewell, and Yusuf heard his voice one last time, carried on the morning wind. "The message has been planted, young prophet. Now comes the harder part, making them believe you." Word spread through Bint Jabil like wildfire through dry grass. By midday, everyone knew. Little Yusuf, the orphan boy, had spent the night in the Cave of Echoes and claimed the Jinn had shown him visions of the end times. Reactions divided sharply. The elderly remembered old stories and crossed themselves nervously. The middle-aged dismissed it as trauma-induced delusion. The young posted about it on social media, turning Yusuf into a viral curiosity. 7-year-old claims Jinn showed him apocalypse, with reactions ranging from mockery to fascination. But Sheikh Hassan did something different. He investigated. For 3 days, he interviewed Yusuf extensively, recording every detail of the visions. He consulted his vast library of Islamic texts, not just the Quran, but thousands of hadiths, scholarly commentaries, books on eschatology spanning centuries of Islamic thought. And what he discovered shook him to his core. On the fourth day, he called a meeting of the village's religious council in the mosque. Mahmud brought Yusuf, who sat quietly in the corner, while 7 bearded men debated his sanity and spiritual state. "The boy is traumatized," Imam Rashid from the neighboring village insisted. "Grief can create elaborate fantasies. I've seen it before. He needs psychiatric care, not religious validation." "But explain this." Sheikh Hassan opened one of his books, his finger marking a passage. Yusuf described technological devices that match exactly what scholars have interpreted from the hadith about Dajjal's era. He spoke of screens that trap souls and people imprisoned by light they carry in their hands. "This matches interpretations of the hadith. You will speak to your whip and your shoelace." Some scholars have suggested this means communication technology. "Coincidence," another council member argued. "The boy has probably seen smartphones, heard adults talk." "He described the Dajjal's physical appearance," Sheikh Hassan continued, his voice steady but intense. "Down to details found only in obscure hadith collections. I know for certain this child has never studied. He said the Dajjal will have writing between his eyes that spells kafir, disbeliever, visible only to the truly faithful. He described the exact location where Isa ibn Maryam will descend, the white minaret in Damascus. These are not things a 7-year-old cobbles together from overheard conversations." He pulled out another book, then another, stacking them on the table. Yusuf spoke of earthquakes in specific sequences, of wars that will erupt over Jerusalem, of technologies that will allow the Dajjal to perform miracles, bringing rain, making the earth produce crops, even appearing to resurrect the dead. Every single detail aligns with authentic hadith and scholarly interpretations. "The Jinn are deceivers," Mahmud said desperately. "Everyone knows this. They could have fed him true information mixed with lies to mislead us." "That is possible," Sheikh Hassan acknowledged, "which is why I asked Yusuf to recite what the Jinn told him about themselves." He gestured to the boy, who stood on shaky legs and recited in a clear voice. Khalil said, "We are believers among the Jinn. We heard the Prophet's recitation and believed, but many of our kind followed Iblis into rebellion. We who remain faithful are fewer with each generation. We are permitted to warn, but not to interfere directly. The choice always belongs to humans. We can show, but we cannot force belief." Sheikh Hassan closed his eyes. "This is doctrinally perfect. It aligns with Surah al-Jinn verse by verse. An adult scholar could say this, a child who barely attends religious lessons. Impossible." The room fell silent. Finally, the eldest council member, Sheikh Karim, who had been quiet until now, spoke. He was 91 years old with a white beard that reached his chest and eyes, that had seen Lebanon through war, peace, and war again. "I was 9 years old," he said softly, "when my grandfather took me to that cave. It was 1942. The world was at war, and he was frightened that Lebanon would be consumed by the fighting. He wanted guidance." The old man's eyes grew distant with memory. "We didn't enter the cave. We only prayed at its entrance, but I saw them. 3 figures watching us from inside, made of light and shadow both. My grandfather bowed to them respectfully and asked for a sign, and one of them spoke. Its voice was like wind through ancient trees." Every man in the room leaned forward. "What did it say?" Sheikh Hassan whispered. "It said, 'The war you fear will pass. Lebanon will survive, but a greater war is coming, not of nations but of souls. When the time is near, when the signs multiply like dates on a tree, we will send a message through one whose heart is still pure. Listen for the voice of a child. In innocence, truth speaks loudest.'" Sheikh Karim looked at Yusuf, tears streaming down his ancient face. "I forgot that message for decades, but the moment I heard what happened to this boy, the memory returned as clear as yesterday. My grandfather's Jinn spoke of this. They spoke of him, 75 years ago." The implications crashed through the room like a wave. "If this is true," Imam Rashid's voice shook, "if this child really received visions from believing Jinn, if this is an authentic warning, then we have a responsibility," Sheikh Hassan finished. "We cannot hide this, we cannot dismiss it. This message needs to be heard." Mahmud stood abruptly. "No, absolutely not. You want to parade my nephew around like some prophet? You want to make him a spectacle? He's 7 years old. He just lost his parents. He needs normalcy, not this madness. He needs," Sheikh Karim said gently, "to to fulfill whatever purpose Allah has chosen for him, and we need to stop thinking like protective adults and start thinking like believers. If Allah can speak through burning bushes and send angels to shepherds, why not send warnings through Jinn to orphans? The news reached Beirut within a week. A journalist from Al Jazeera called Sheikh Hassan, wanting to interview the Child Prophet. A YouTube channel with 2 million subscribers posted a video. Lebanese boy claims Jinn showed him end times, hoax or holy sign. The attention was overwhelming, and it divided the Muslim community sharply. Progressive Muslims dismissed it as medieval superstition that embarrassed modern Islam. This is exactly the kind of backward thinking that makes the West mock us, one popular Lebanese blogger wrote. A traumatized child hallucinates in a cave, and suddenly we're supposed to believe it's divine revelation. But traditional scholars across the Middle East watched the videos of Yusuf being interviewed by Sheikh Hassan and felt something they couldn't dismiss. The child spoke with an authority and knowledge that defied explanation. When religious experts questioned him, expecting to catch him in contradictions, he answered with perfect theological precision. "Describe the Dajjal's deception," one scholar demanded via video call. "He will come claiming godhood," Yusuf replied calmly. "He will perform wonders, bringing rain to drought lands, raising crops from barren soil, even appearing to resurrect the dead. But it will all be deception, permitted by Allah as a test. The faithful will recognize him because the word kafir will be written between his eyes, and his right eye will be milky like a rotten grape. He will travel the entire world in 40 days, but he will never enter Mecca or Medina, because the angels guard those cities." Where does this knowledge come from? Khalil showed me. He said these things are known among the believing jinn because they have lived through all human history. They saw what happened to previous nations who ignored warnings. They know what's coming because they've already seen the signs beginning. The scholar fell silent, his skepticism crumbling. But the real test came when a wealthy Saudi businessman named Abdullah al-Rashid heard about Yusuf. Abdullah was a collector of religious artifacts and a patron of Islamic scholarship. He had spent 20 years studying eschatology and had written 3 books on the subject. He flew to Lebanon specifically to meet Yusuf. The meeting took place in Sheikh Hassan's modest home. Abdullah arrived in expensive clothes, accompanied by 2 religious scholars he'd brought from Riyadh. They set up cameras, prepared extensive questions, and approached the whole thing like a trial. Yusuf sat on a cushion, looking even smaller than his 7 years, exhausted from weeks of interviews and attention. "Young man," Abdullah began formally, "I have studied the end times for 2 decades. I have read thousands of hadith, consulted with scholars from Al-Azhar to Malaysia, so forgive me if I'm skeptical of a child claiming special knowledge." "I don't claim special knowledge," Yusuf said quietly. "I just saw what they showed me." "Then let's test that. Tell me, what is the sequence of the major signs? In what order do they occur?" Yusuf took a breath. "Khalil said the minor signs have been occurring for centuries. The spreading of knowledge yet decrease of wisdom, the building of tall buildings competing in height, time passing more quickly, earthquakes increasing. But the major signs will come rapidly, one after another like beads falling from a broken string." He closed his eyes, remembering. "First the sun will rise from the west. This will close the door of repentance forever. Then the beast will emerge from the earth speaking to humanity. Then the smoke will descend, blinding and choking. Then Dajjal will appear, deceiving all but the most faithful. Then Isa ibn Maryam will descend to defeat him. Then Ya'juj and Ma'juj will be released, consuming everything until Allah destroys them. Then the earth will throw up its treasures of gold and silver, but they will have no value. Then 3 landslides, one in the east, one in the west, one in Arabia. Then the fire from Yemen that drives humanity to their final gathering place." Abdullah's pen had stopped moving. His mouth was slightly open. "The beads from a broken string," he whispered. "That's the exact metaphor used by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in a hadith recorded by Imam Muslim." "How do you know that?" "Khalil told me. He was there when the Prophet spoke those words." One of Abdullah's scholars leaned forward. "Ask him about the protected ones. If he truly received this from believing jinn, he should know about them." Abdullah nodded slowly. "Yusuf, did the jinn tell you about any groups of people who will be protected during these trials?" Yusuf's young face grew sad. "They showed me many things that made me cry. I saw so much suffering. But yes, Khalil said there will always be a group who remain on truth, protected by their faith. He called them Al-Ta'ifa al-Mansura, the aided group. They will remain in Jerusalem and surrounding areas, fighting for truth even when the whole world seems lost. And he said there will be believers who flee to the mountains, to caves, living simply and preserving faith like embers under ash, waiting for the coming of Isa. Both scholars from Riyadh sat back simultaneously, exchanging looks of shock. That terminology, one whispered, that understanding of the protected believers. This is advanced eschatological knowledge. Abdullah stared at Yusuf for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He stood, walked over to the child and knelt before him. Forgive my skepticism, young brother. I came here to expose a fraud. Instead, I find a testimony I cannot deny. He looked at Sheikh Hassan. This needs to be documented properly. This needs to reach scholars worldwide. Because if this is authentic, and I believe it is, then we are living in the time of warnings. The minor signs are all around us, and the major signs are approaching. He turned back to Yusuf. Are you frightened, child, knowing what you know? Yusuf thought for a moment. Khalil said something before I left the cave. He said, every ending is also a beginning. The trials are tests, but they're also mercy, chances to return to Allah before it's too late. So I'm not frightened for myself. I'm frightened for all the people who won't listen. 6 months after Yusuf's night in the cave, a historic meeting took place in Beirut. Religious scholars from across the Muslim world gathered to examine the case of the Cave Boy, as media had dubbed him. The Grand Mufti of Lebanon presided. Scholars from Al-Azhar University in Egypt, from Qom Seminary in Iran, from the Islamic University of Medina, from Malaysia's Islamic Development Department, all present. Journalists from Al Jazeera, BBC Arabic and dozens of Islamic media outlets crowded the hall, and sitting in the center of it all, looking impossibly small and tired, was Yusuf. The deliberations lasted 3 days. Yusuf was questioned by each scholar in turn. They tested him on Quranic interpretation, hadith authenticity, theological nuances that most adults couldn't grasp. They brought in psychologists to evaluate his mental state. They investigated his background, his education, his family, looking for any way he could have learned this material naturally. And they found nothing. No explanation except the one Yusuf had given from the beginning. The Jinn showed me. On the final day, the Grand Mufti stood to deliver the council's verdict. The room fell into absolute silence. We have examined this case with thoroughness befitting its gravity, he began, his voice heavy with the weight of decision. We have questioned this child exhaustively. We have consulted historical records, authentic hadith collections, and scholarly opinions spanning 14 centuries of Islamic jurisprudence. He paused, looking directly at Yusuf. And we have prayed for guidance from Allah, asking him to show us if this is truth or deception. Our conclusion is as follows. We cannot definitively prove that Yusuf ibn Khalid received visions from believing jinn. The nature of such experiences places them beyond empirical verification. However, the Grand Mufti's voice strengthened, we also cannot find any reasonable explanation for how a 7-year-old orphan with minimal religious education could possess detailed, accurate, and theologically sound knowledge of Islamic eschatology that rivals trained scholars. The knowledge he demonstrates is real. The precision of his testimony aligns perfectly with authentic sources. And the content of his message, warning of end times, calling for return to faith, emphasizing signs already visible around us, this message is itself Islamically sound and beneficial. He looked around the room. Therefore, while we do not declare this definitively as divine revelation, for revelation ended with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we also do not dismiss it. We acknowledge it as a possible sign, a potential warning, something worthy of serious consideration by all Muslims. We recommend that Yusuf's testimony be documented and studied. We recommend that the signs he spoke of be compared with observable reality. And most importantly, we recommend that Muslims everywhere examine their own lives, their own faith, and ask themselves, are we ready for what may be coming? Because whether these visions came from jinn or from the child's own unconscious connection to Islamic teachings stored in his pure heart, the message itself cannot be denied. We live in times of trial. The minor signs of the end are visible everywhere. And only by returning to true faith, by living Islam not just as ritual but as transformation, can we hope to face what's ahead. The Grand Mufti turned back to Yusuf. Young brother, you have carried a heavy burden with remarkable courage. We do not know what purpose Allah has for you, but we recognize that you have become an unwitting reminder to us all. May Allah protect you and grant you peace. But then something unexpected happened. Yusuf stood up. Respected scholars, he said, his young voice somehow carrying through the hall. May I say something? The Grand Mufti gestured permission. I know you're trying to be careful. I know you can't just accept my story without proof, and I understand that. Yusuf's eyes filled with tears. But Khalil told me something else, something I haven't shared with anyone yet because I was scared. Every person in the room leaned forward. He said that within 1 year there would be 3 signs that would prove my testimony was true. 3 events that I've seen in the visions that will happen exactly as shown, so that people will know the warnings were real. Sheikh Hassan stood quickly. Yusuf, what signs? What did you see? Yusuf took a shaking breath. First, there will be an earthquake in a place where earthquakes are rare. A city that thinks itself safe will shake, and people will remember that the earth is in Allah's control, not theirs. Second, there will be a discovery in Jerusalem. Something ancient that has been hidden will be found, and it will prove that the final battles prophesied will indeed center there. Third, Yusuf's voice broke. Third, someone famous for denying faith will suddenly, publicly accept Islam. Someone no one expects. And their conversion will shock the world and make millions ask, what do they know that we don't? The room erupted in whispered conversations. Scholars frantically took notes. Journalists' cameras flashed. These 3 signs, Yusuf continued, Khalil said they will happen within 1 year, and when they do, he said people will have to choose. Will they finally listen, or will they keep ignoring the warnings until it's too late? The Grand Mufti raised his hands for silence. If what you say is true, young brother, then in 1 year we will know beyond doubt. Until then we will watch, we will wait, and we will pray. The world watched. Yusuf's prophecies spread across social media, debated in mosques from Jakarta to Morocco, discussed in Islamic universities worldwide. Skeptics scoffed, believers prayed, and everyone waited. 3 months later, the first sign occurred. London, England, a city not known for seismic activity, was struck by a 5.8 magnitude earthquake. It happened at 2:47 a.m. on a Friday night, strong enough to crack Big Ben's tower and send thousands fleeing their homes in panic. No major casualties, but the psychological impact was profound. This is London, a BBC reporter said, standing in front of damaged buildings. We don't have earthquakes here. This is unprecedented in recorded history. Islamic media exploded. The cave boy's first prediction has come true. Headlines appeared in Arabic, Urdu, Malay, and dozens of other languages. Videos of Yusuf's testimony were shared millions of times, with timestamps highlighting his exact words. An earthquake in a place where earthquakes are rare. A city that thinks itself safe will shake. But skeptics remained. Coincidence, they said. The world has hundreds of earthquakes daily. One happening in an unusual location means nothing. Yusuf himself said little. He had returned to as normal a life as possible in Bin Jubail back in school, trying to be just a child again. But people looked at him differently now, some with awe, some with fear, some with the kind of attention that feels like a weight. I wish I could forget, he told Sheikh Hassan one evening. I wish I could just play with my cousins and not think about the end of the world. I know, child, the old Imam replied gently. But Allah chooses whom He wills for His purposes. All we can do is bear our burdens with patience and trust His wisdom. 5 months after London, the second sign occurred. In Jerusalem, during routine renovation work under the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, workers discovered a sealed chamber. Inside were scrolls, ancient scrolls dating back nearly 3,000 years, written in Hebrew and Aramaic. The Israeli Antiquities Authority initially tried to keep it quiet, but news leaked. The scrolls contained prophecies, warnings about a final battle over Jerusalem, descriptions of a deceiver who would claim divinity, and detailed accounts of a figure who would come to defeat this deceiver, accounts that Islamic scholars immediately recognized as describing Isa ibn Maryam. These aren't Islamic texts, Dr. Miriam Cohen, the lead archaeologist, told reporters, clearly shaken. These are ancient Jewish and Christian prophecies, but they align almost perfectly with Islamic eschatology. It's as if all 3 Abrahamic faiths were given the same warning, expressed in different languages. The discovery made international headlines. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera all covered it extensively, and in every Islamic news outlet the same connection was made. This is the second sign the cave boy predicted. Something ancient that has been hidden will be found, Yusuf had said, and it will prove that the final battles prophesied will indeed center there. The debates intensified. Scholars organized conferences. YouTube channels devoted to Islamic eschatology gained millions of subscribers overnight. And a new question emerged. If the first two signs came true, what about the third? Someone famous for denying faith will suddenly, publicly accept Islam, someone no one expects, and their conversion will shock the world. Who would it be? Religious forums speculated wildly. A Hollywood actor? A world leader? A famous scientist? The answer came 10 months after Yusuf's testimony, and it stunned everyone. Dr. Richard Dawkins, the man who had spent 40 years as the world's most famous atheist, the author of The God Delusion, the person who had debated religious leaders worldwide, always arguing that faith was delusion and science was the only truth. That Dr. Richard Dawkins. At 83 years old, during what was supposed to be a debate at Oxford University about evolution and faith, he did the unthinkable. He stopped mid-sentence, closed his eyes, and began to weep. "I've been wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I've spent my entire life arguing against God because I couldn't see him. But recently, I've had experiences I cannot explain with science, dreams, visions, a presence so overwhelming that to deny it would be to deny reality itself." The audience sat in shocked silence. "Last night," Dawkins continued, "I had a dream. I was standing before a cave, and something, told me to enter. Inside, I saw everything. The complexity of creation, yes, but more than that. I saw purpose, intentionality, design not as a trap for fools, but as a signature of the Creator." He paused, tears streaming down his weathered face. "And I saw a small boy, telling me that truth isn't always found in microscopes. Sometimes it's found in submission." Then Dr. Richard Dawkins, in front of cameras broadcasting to millions worldwide, recited the Shahada. "Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah." The world exploded. Christian leaders called it the greatest tragedy of modern theology. Atheist communities accused him of senility or brain damage. But Islamic communities saw it exactly as Yusuf had predicted, a sign that will make millions ask, what do they know that we don't? Within weeks, 300,000 people converted to Islam, citing Dawkins' testimony and the cave boy's prophecies as catalysts. If all three predictions came true, they reasoned, then maybe the other warnings are real too. 2 years have passed since Yusuf's night in the Cave of Echoes. He is 9 years old now, still living with Uncle Mahmoud, still attending school in Binjbale. But nothing is normal, and probably never will be again. People come from around the world to see him. Pilgrims, they call themselves, though Yusuf insists he's not a saint or prophet. They come seeking blessings, asking questions, wanting to touch the child who spoke with Jinn. Sheikh Hassan tries to limit access, but the flow is constant. Yusuf handles it with a grace that seems impossible for his age. He answers questions patiently. He recites what he remembers from the visions. But mostly, he tells people what Khalil told him. Return to Allah. Pray with your heart, not just your body. Love each other. Protect the earth. Prepare your souls. The signs are accelerating. The scientific community has tried to study him. Neurologists, psychologists, and skeptics have examined his brain for abnormalities, tested his memory, analyzed his speech patterns. They find nothing unusual, just a remarkably intelligent child with detailed knowledge he shouldn't possess. But Yusuf carries a sadness that never quite leaves his eyes. He still misses his parents. He still feels the weight of what he saw, visions of suffering and destruction that no child should witness. And he bears the burden of knowing that most people, even after 3 correct predictions, still won't truly change. Why don't they listen? He asked Sheikh Hassan last week, tears in his eyes. The signs are all around them. The earth is rebelling. People are more connected but lonelier than ever. Faith is dying in hearts even while mosques stand tall. Why don't they see? Because seeing requires courage, the old imam replied. It's easier to dismiss warnings than to change. People prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Will the 4th sign come soon? What 4th sign? Yusuf looked toward the mountain, toward the Cave of Echoes visible in the distance. Khalil told me there would be a 4th, but this one won't be a proof. It will be a point of no return. A sign after which the major events will accelerate too quickly to prepare. He didn't tell me what it is or when, just that it's coming. Sheikh Hassan felt his old heart grow cold. And when it comes, then everyone will finally believe. But for many it will be too late. Last month the Grand Mufti returned to Bint Jibale. He spent 3 days with Yusuf, and on the final evening, he made a formal announcement. After extensive consultation and prayer, we have decided to compile Yusuf's testimony into an official document. It will be studied in Islamic universities, translated into every major language, and preserved as one of the signs of our times. Whether people believe it as divine warning or consider it remarkable coincidence, the message itself, the call to return to authentic faith, is undeniably needed. He placed his hand on Yusuf's head. You've done what was asked of you, child. The message has been delivered. What people do with it is their choice and their responsibility. But there's one more thing most people don't know, something Yusuf has only told Sheikh Hassan and his uncle Mahmoud. Every month on the night of the full moon, he still hears Khalil's voice, not in dreams now, but in the wind. The ancient Jinn speaks gently, checking on the child who became his messenger, offering comfort when the burden feels too heavy. You're not alone, young witness, Khalil whispers. We watch over you, and when your time comes to return to Allah, we will welcome your soul with honor, because you carried truth when lies were easier. And sometimes, late at night, Yusuf climbs the path toward the Cave of Echoes. He doesn't enter, hasn't entered since that first night, but he sits outside under the stars and talks to beings most people will never see. I did what you asked, he tells them. I told them everything. Some believed, some changed, but most just went back to their lives. And Khalil's voice replies, gentle as always. That is the human condition, young one. Prophets warned their nations for decades, and still people refused to listen until destruction was upon them. You've done your part. The rest is between them and Allah. Uncle Mahmoud, who now treats his nephew with a mixture of pride and protective fear, found Yusuf at the cave entrance one night. You shouldn't come here alone, he scolded gently. I'm not alone, uncle, Yusuf replied, smiling for the first time in weeks. I'm never alone. They're always watching. The believers among the Jinn, the angels Allah sends to guard children, the spirits of Mama and Baba, who I feel in the wind. I'm surrounded by witnesses. And as they walked home together, Uncle Mahmoud could have sworn he saw figures standing at the cave entrance, tall, shifting shapes made of starlight and mist, watching over the child who had become a bridge between worlds. So what do we take from the story of Yusuf and the Cave of Echoes? What lesson do we carry from this testimony that has shaken the Islamic world and puzzled skeptics? First, understand this. The unseen world is real. Jinn are not folklore or metaphor. They are beings created by Allah from smokeless fire, living alongside us in a dimension we cannot perceive. Some are believers, some are not. Some carry messages, some carry malice. But they exist, whether our modern minds accept it or not. The Quran is explicit. And I did not create the Jinn and mankind except to worship me. 51:56. We are not alone in this universe. We share it with beings whose existence we must acknowledge, even if we cannot see them. Second, remember that purity matters. Why was Yusuf chosen? Not because he was the most educated or the most pious. He was chosen because his heart was still pure, unmarked by cynicism, arrogance, or the 1,000 small lies adults tell themselves. Children can see what adults have forgotten to look for. Their faith is uncomplicated. Their hearts are open. This is why protecting childhood innocence is a sacred duty in Islam. Not just physical innocence, but spiritual innocence, keeping hearts clean of hatred, doubt, and materialism. Third, know that the signs are accelerating. Yusuf spoke of minor signs already visible. Technology disconnecting humans from each other. Climate change ravaging the earth. Empty mosques despite full parking lots, knowledge spreading, yet wisdom decreasing. Look around. Is he wrong? And if the minor signs are multiplying, how long before the major ones begin? The 3 predictions that came true were meant as mercy, warnings to wake us up before it's too late. Will we heed them, or will we scroll past them like everything else in our distracted lives? Fourth, understand that every ending is also a beginning. Yes, the end times sound terrifying, but they're also a mercy. They're Allah's way of saying, time is running out. If you're going to turn back to me, do it now. If you're going to fix your life, your family, your faith, do it now. The trials ahead are tests, yes, but tests are opportunities. Opportunities to prove faith, to choose good over evil, to stand for truth when lies are easier. Before I end, I need you to do something. Look at your own life. Ask yourself, when was the last time you prayed with your heart fully present, not just your body going through motions? When was the last time you put down your phone and truly connected with your family? When was the last time you did something for Allah's sake alone, not for recognition or reward? When was the last time you felt truly, deeply grateful for the gift of existence? If you can't remember, then the warnings are for you. If you feel a twinge of guilt reading this, that's your soul trying to wake up. Listen to it. Yusuf's message was simple. Return to Allah before it's too late. Love each other. Protect the earth. Prepare your souls. The signs are accelerating, and the time for preparation is now. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories that wake the soul. Leave a comment telling me, has this story changed how you see the world? Will you heed the warnings or dismiss them as superstition? Yusuf is 11 years old now. He still lives in Bint Jubail. He still hears Khalil's voice in the wind, and he still carries the visions that marked his soul forever. Last week he told Sheikh Hassan, the fourth sign is very close now. I can feel it. Everything is about to change. And somewhere in the mountains of Lebanon, in the darkness of the Cave of Echoes, ancient beings who have watched empires rise and fall continue their eternal vigil, waiting, watching, remembering the promise they made, to warn humanity one last time before the final act begins. The warning has been delivered. The signs have been shown. The choice is now yours. Will you listen to the voice of a child who saw what adults refuse to see? Or will you scroll past this story, like everything else, until the day when scrolling no longer matters because time has run out? Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you all. May Allah guide us to truth, protect us in the trials ahead, and grant us the wisdom to recognize warnings before they become realities. Remember, in a world of lies, sometimes truth comes from the most unexpected sources, like the pure heart of an orphan who spent one night speaking with Jinn in a cave older than nations. The mountain still stands, the cave still waits, and the warnings still echo for those with ears to hear.